to like give an apology.
Okay, so I want to understand. Okay, so let me understand what you affirm. You're saying Jesus came to earth and became a man.
Absolutely.
So was he that all-powerful, all-being, has no need God at that time or not?
He was both God and man.
Again, that's like a square circle,
You
right?
can say that's like
because
a square
because God has no needs.
You see that? The sheikh said, see, that's like a square circle. So he's claiming, he's referring back to what they already said. He's saying, yeah, it is like a square circle, bro. And then obviously Rogers doesn't think so, but let's continue watching.
Right?
As his divine nature. So think of it this way. I mean, it's not that hard, really.
It is hard because it's confusing. It's like a square circle.
You're asserting that it is. But
to me, it is.
There hasn't been a demonstration of that. What I'm getting at is as God. So as an example, you think man has a soul, man has a body.
Yes.
Right? Your soul and your body are not the same thing. They're both you.
True.
We don't want to get into a whole tangent here.
I'm with you.
But there are things that are true of you bodily that aren't true of you in terms of your soul or spirit.
Okay.
Right? If your body dies, does your soul die?
No.
No. As Christians, we believe Christ is both God and man, just like man is body and soul.
Okay.
Right? Man has those two constituent elements. So all I'm saying is, although the attributes of Christ as God are such as he is omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, all of these things, his human attributes and qualities are most definitely character. He's in one place at one time. He gets hungry. He slept. He wept.
Did he go to the bathroom?
He absolutely did.
God went to the bathroom.
God became flesh
and went to the bathroom.
Dwelt among us. And
did he get diarrhea?
So Rogers is using the example as he says in the same way, in a similar way, that man is both body and soul, and there's things that are true of your body that are not true of your soul, and vice versa. The incarnation is the same thing. Now, we're going to investigate that claim to see whether or not it's analogous, and I'm going to demonstrate that Rogers' own words show that it's not analogous. His analogy falls apart, and we're going to see why.
Secured salvation. He died on the cross. What more do you want?
That's pretty.
What more do you want than that? Huh?
You are Muslim, aren't you? This is a secret, right? He got tortured.
Absolutely.
God got tortured.
His back was whipped.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And he cried out to who?
He cried out to his father.
But he didn't say father. He said God.
But
he said my God. But he is God.
Yes.
That doesn't make sense now. Again, that doesn't make sense.
We already talked about that earlier.
And it didn't make sense earlier. But let me.
Well, then it doesn't make sense to say Allah has sifat.
Of course it does.
No.
Allah's sifat are part of Him. Allah's sifat don't separate. Allah's sifat don't need to go to the bathroom.
Allah's sifat.
Go ahead.
You believe that the Quran is the instantiation?
See, again, now he's trying to go back to the attributes issue, and which I dealt with in the previous stream, so I'm not going to really touch on that much. But he's saying again, Christ having two natures is analogous. So before he tried to use the Trinity as example, now he's using. So check this out. This is to show you how inconsistent these Christian apologists are. And I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying these guys. I think mainly they're kind of jokers. But if you remember in the first video, they compared the attributes of Allah to the persons of the Trinity. Now, in order to say, hey, what are you guys complaining about? You guys got a problem. It's the same thing here. So wait, if the attribute of Allah is the same thing as a person or similar, now in this section when we're talking about the incarnation, which is one person with two natures. See, look, check this out. The Trinity is one being or one nature, three persons. The incarnation is a mirror image of that. It's the opposite. It is one person with two natures. So in the Trinity, you have one nature, three persons. In the incarnation, you have one person, two natures. So now what he did was he said analogously in the same way that we have multiple persons with one nature in the Trinity, you have one nature with multiple attributes. So he compared the attributes to the persons. Now what he's doing is with the incarnation, he's comparing the multiple natures to the multiple attributes in God. Well, wait, hold on a second. You just flipped the switch. If the attributes were akin to persons, how could the attributes be both analogous to persons and yet natures, which you say that the natures and persons are fundamentally two different things? In order for you to get the Trinity off the ground, you have to make a distinction between nature and person. When it comes to the Trinity, you say that the persons are analogous to the attributes of Allah. And then when it comes to the incarnation, you say, no, it's not the persons that are analogous, because in Christ there's only one person. But you say it's the natures, the two natures aspect, the multiplicity of natures is analogous to the multiplicity of attributes in Allah. So which one is it? Is it nature that is similar to the attributes of God, or is it persons, or is it both? And if it's both, then that means they would have to be similar to each other. And if it is, then it destroys the whole Trinity, because the Trinity is based on the whole assumption that person and nature are different. So, I mean, it's just a hypocritical argument. It doesn't really work. To me, it seems like a case of, well, anytime the Christian gets into a problem, whether it be with the Trinity or incarnation, he's just trying to go to Allah and his attributes. And I already destroyed that whole argument in the last video. So I suggest people go watch it. But let's continue watching, inshallah.
I just told you earlier. No, you didn't. No Muslim says that this right in your hand is a part of Allah.
Well, first of all, that's not even an Arabic.
Exactly. So for you to lift this up doesn't make any sense, right?
But you do what I meant. I do. This represents that.
And I will tell you, as I told David, when you didn't listen, I guess, but I'll say it again. You guys want to be... All right,
no, I'm listening to you, but I'm also finding what you want, because I can get it really quickly.
Okay, so now the issue gets to be the sifat of Allah are a part of Allah. Even if Allah reveals, you understand the difference between revealing and becoming separate, right? The sifat of Allah never have weaknesses. You can burn the written copy, because that's not the Quran. The Quran is what is recited. It cannot be corrupted. Somebody can make a mistake in their reading, but their reading is not the sifat of Allah. Now, Jesus saying, my God,
human nature is not part of his divine essence.
Okay, so that's a confusing.
So hear that he says Jesus's. Let's just rewind that. Let's just make it precise, okay? I don't want to misquote the guy. This is an important part, though.
The sifat of Allah. Now, Jesus saying, my God,
human nature is not part of his divine essence.
Okay,
so Jesus' human nature is not part of the divine essence. That's a claim.
That's the confusing part here, because you're saying that the soul is a part of me. Without the soul, I can't exist. Right?
But you
so
are your soul.
You are. Thank you. So if you are your.
Now look at what he just said here. It's going to conflict with his earlier statement. He said, "You are your soul," meaning that you are identical to your soul. Before, he used the example of the incarnation being like two natures, where you have, it's the same thing as man, that he's both a soul and a body. And one is physical and one's immaterial, supposedly, right? So he says this is analogous to the idea of the incarnation of having two sets of contradictory attributes, because you got these things that are true of the soul that are not true of the body, and vice versa. But now he explicitly states that you are your soul. And I agree with this, okay? Tentatively speaking, I agree with this, that you are your soul. Now, if we go with this, Mr. Anthony, that you are your soul, then the things that you can predicate of the body aren't necessarily predicated of you, because you are your soul. You're not your body, according to your own words. And I'm going to give more examples for why this is a reason that we should actually think so. One, for Mr. Anthony, is in the case of Jesus, and two is in the case of the what's called the intermediate state in Christianity, and I'll explain what that is in Islam as well, which I also agree with, because it's a thought experiment to get you to think about this issue. But let me get back to playing the video.
soul, and then Jesus is his soul, and you're saying that's God. So for God to be now saying my God makes you know that doesn't make sense.
No. But you misunderstood me.
Okay.
Christ has both a human soul and a human body, and his divine nature.
Oh,
man
so
is both
Christ
body and
is three things now.
soul. No, well, this is classic Christianity.
This is excellent. Excellent.
You're just learning this.
I'm just learning it from you because you're such a good explainer.
This is classic Chalcedonian.
Excellent.
Chalcedon, right?
I have.
Chalcedon was a Christian creed, 451. The classic Chalcedonian statement is just like man is body and soul, God and man is one Christ.
Okay, so, let me just ask that. Let me just ask, because I want to understand that. Let me just, okay. So Christ, according to you, he was human, he had a soul,
real body and soul,
and he was God. That's three things in Christ.
So Christ had a real human body and soul. Pay attention to that. He also had a will. Anthony didn't explicitly state this, but I know he believes that.
So he has all the attributes of humanity, body and soul, and he has a divine nature.
So that's what I just said, right?
So human nature and divine nature.
So he has a soul.
Absolutely.
When was his soul created?
So again, the soul of Christ
Anthony.
is human.
Okay,
right?
so when was his human soul created?
Christ became man when he became incarnate.
So the soul, it's a very simple question. It's okay. No, nobody else got it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
When was his soul created? The soul of Christ.
I'm saying that the humanity of Christ, body and soul,
Yes.
starts at the point of conception, the virgin birth.
Okay. Can you give me any reference to the Bible about when the soul of Jesus was created, as you just gave that answer, but about the soul?
So the Bible teaches that man's soul is formed along with his body. It's formed within him.
Okay,
so Psalm 139,
okay,
among others, talks about the fact that God knits people together in their mother's womb. This is, from the Christian perspective, the time when man himself comes into existence.
So Jesus came into existence as a man.
Is human.
Okay.
Yeah, it's human nature.
So Jesus' soul.
Zechariah 12:10 also makes 12:1.
Those are not about Jesus, right? Those are general.
Those are about
human
beings.
beings.
About souls and bodies.
I asked you about Jesus' soul particularly.
So, just like you reasoned earlier, from the general to the particular, all I'm saying is...
So you're saying the general rules about humanity are why you're taking the fact in your mind that Jesus' soul came in. So Jesus had no soul until he was in the womb of Mary.
He had no human soul until...
Gotcha. And when he came in the womb of Mary, his soul came into creation.
So yeah, his body and soul originate at that
Gotcha.
time.
And his body. And when he died, according to you on the cross, where did his soul go?
His body died. His soul remained united to his divine nature.
Okay.
And he ascended into heaven.
So before.
So hear what he said. He said his body died, his soul remained united to the divine nature, and he ascended into heaven. So he's given this picture as if Christ's body, he left it behind and he didn't take the body into heaven. Well, if Christ's body did not ascend into heaven, and let me just remove this for a second. Let's think about this. Let's do this thought experiment. So first, Rogers tries to draw an analogy between the incarnation, which is one person, Christ, having two sets of contradictory attributes. He says that's analogous to one person or human being having a soul and a body. Now, he says, in the beginning, he says, you are your soul and body, right? And that there's certain things that you can say that are true of the body that aren't true of the soul, and vice versa. And if that's the case, then what's the big contradiction? You have the same issue even as a human being. It's not really an issue. It's the same thing with Christ having two sets of contradictory attributes. But then he goes on to say to the sheikh, he says, you are your soul. And the sheikh goes, yeah. And he fist bumps him. He's like, yeah, I can agree with that, bro. It's like, I can get down with that, crook. And they both fist bump and they're like, yeah, you are your soul. Now, the issue is if you are your soul, then his analogy doesn't work. And when he says you are your soul, what does that mean? Who is the you? If the you is the person of the human being, then that means the soul itself is sufficient for human personhood. If the soul itself is the you or the personal pronoun, and it's sufficient for human personhood, and Christ had a human soul, then that would mean that Christ was a human person. But guess what? Classical Chalcedonian Christology, which Rogers goes on to quote and draw from, is the idea that Christ was only one person, which was a divine person, with two complete natures, fully God, divine nature, fully man, human nature. If you say, Anthony Rogers, that Christ or you say that the soul is who you are your soul, that the soul, the human soul, is responsible for personal identity, then that means if Christ had a human soul, then he would also be a human person. And that would mean then that you would have Nestorianism. You would have one person, which is the divine person, who was a person prior to the incarnation. He takes on a human nature, which is a human soul and a human body, which is sufficient for human personhood, because Rogers says that you are your soul, which means that the soul itself would be sufficient for human personhood. That means if Christ had a human soul, he would be two persons. If Christ was two persons, that's Nestorianism, which is a heresy. And I argue actually that classical Chalcedonian Christology is fundamentally Nestorian because of this problem. And that's why many of the Nestorians actually were happy with the Chalcedonian Creed. They said, yeah, we're cool with it because it fit with their understanding that Christ really was two persons. So people really need to understand this point. Second thing is, like I said, when he says that you are your soul, that contradicts his own argument, because he said in order to make the analogy between the soul and body of a human to Christ, who has two complete natures, it would have to mean that I am my soul body composite or together. But he said that I am my soul. Therefore, anything you predicate of the body doesn't have to be predicated of the soul, so there's no contradiction. I mean, there's no contradiction in what Rogers is stating, because he said that you are your soul, which means I am not my body. If I'm not my body, then there's no contradiction. However, with Christ, if the one person of Christ includes both the human and divine natures. Now, another thing to consider here, Mr. Rogers, you say that Christ had a human soul and human body. The body died when Christ ascended into heaven. He ascended with the human nature united, or the human soul, I should say, united to the divine nature. If it was the divine nature plus the human soul and not the human body, then I have a question for you. Is Christ everlastingly one person with two natures? Is he everlastingly, meaning forever going forward? Will he always be one person with two natures, fully God and fully man? If you say no, well, then that seems to be a problem, because Christians that I speak to say he's forever God and man. So that seems to be a huge issue. Second thing is, if you say that Christ, well, we're going to obviously say that Christ was still fully divine. Was Christ still fully human when he ascended to heaven? If you say yes, which is the only logical answer you get left, it's either yes or no. If Christ was still fully human and he didn't have a human body, what does that tell you? That a human soul is sufficient for humanity, and that a human body is not necessary for humanity or a human nature. Which means the analogy between a soul-body composite and the two natures doesn't work, because the nature of man doesn't necessitate a human body. That's an example from Christ himself, because he ascended into heaven without a body, supposedly by Rogers. If he didn't have the body, was he still fully man? If he was still fully man, that means he doesn't need the human body in order to be considered fully man. And if he didn't need a body in order to be considered fully man, that the analogy between the body and soul and Christ's two natures isn't going to fly. It doesn't work. It doesn't get off the ground. Second point to consider is, Mr. Rogers, question for you. Do you believe in what's called the intermediate state, which is that especially believers, when they die, which Paul seems to allude to this, I think it's in 1 Corinthians 15, if my memory serves me correct. The intermediate state is the doctrine which says that when human beings die, like Roger said, which we also as Muslims agree with, the body dies, right? And part of the general resurrection at the end of the days, or on Judgment Day, I should say, is that God resurrects the human bodies and unites them with the human souls. same bodies with the same human souls. Now, the question is, what do you believe in the intermediate state? The intermediate state is that there is an existence, that the person or the soul has an existence without being attached to the human body. Now, during this intermediate state, Mr. Rogers, is that human soul apart from the human body, is that still a human? Is that still fully man, or is he part man? If he's still fully man, then yet again, this is another example in which the human soul is apart from the human body, and yet you're still calling it fully man or fully human, which means that the body is not necessary. It's just merely accidental to the human nature. Because if you say that he's not a fully human, then what is he? If he's not a man, what is he? It's just a human soul, and he's not fully human. He's only partly human. That's a bit of a stretch. You want to accept that? Be my guest. But then you have to say that Jesus Christ, because he didn't have the body, is not fully man now. He's only fully God and part man because he has a soul, but he doesn't have the body. You don't want to go down that route, my brother. You don't want to go down that route. So we have Christ as an example. Second example we have as the intermediate state. If you accept the intermediate state, that before after death, prior to the general resurrection or judgment day, human souls have an existence and they're alive. They're not dead in that sense. That they have an existence apart from the human body. Is that, first of all, is that a human nature? Or is it partly human nature? If it's partly human nature, then Christ only has part of a human nature because he doesn't have a human body right now in heaven, according to Rogers. Secondly is that soul, human soul, is that still a human person in terms of the intermediate state? If he's not still a human person, then what in the world is he? He's part of a man, and he doesn't have a full human nature in the intermediate state. And check this out. He's not a full human person. Well, that means that the soul is not sufficient for human personhood. That means he needs a body in order to be a person, which makes no sense. Then at what point in the stage of development in the womb, for example, and this has implications for abortion, at what point does the full body develop? At what point in that stage of development with the physical body is it a human person? If it's at conception and the body is not fully there, then that means it has to be the soul that's sufficient for the person. And this is going to have big implications for your Christology, my friend, Mr. Rogers. Well, let's go on. Let's listen to a little bit more. But this is the main crux of the issue, and that's why I'm getting a little bit repetitive, because I want people to really understand what this is. Let me play a little bit more, inshallah. Bismillah.
Before that time, there was no soul, but there was Jesus. And then before Jesus was born, he had no soul.
Right.
So then God increased the soul of Jesus later. That's what you just said.
That's not at all what I said.
Okay, let me repeat it again. Let me say what I said, and then you can correct me. Anthony, we got this. Okay.
So you laugh track over here.
People laugh. It's okay. So now, when you said that Jesus had no soul before his human conception, right? So there was Jesus, part of God. There was God himself, and then the Holy Ghost. We're not even going to go there. Okay. Then Jesus came to the womb of Mary, and a soul was created. They didn't exist before. Then you're saying no. You're saying no? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were shaking your head. Okay, so then Jesus was born with a human soul and a human body and a godly nature, 3 components. Then he goes on a cross and he dies, and his body dies. His soul now, that was newly created, now becomes a part of God. No? That's exactly what you said. Okay, tell me what you said. Tell me what you said.
Just like you said to me earlier, not putting words in your mouth.
I'm not.
Really? For me, I didn't say anything like that.
You guys got it on video, but go ahead.
We got it on video.
Good. Tell me again.
What I told you, you said his soul increased, and I never said anything along those lines either. What I said is very clear, and this is just classic Christian theology. Right? Chalcedon is just solidifying what was always taught by Christians. At Chalcedon, it says that Christ took on a true human nature. Human nature is a body-soul entity. Right? Man is an ensouled being, an embodied soul. Okay? So when Christ takes on a human nature, he takes
So now notice what he says. He goes flip-flops back and says that a human nature is a body and a human soul, human body. Question, Mr. Anthony, in the intermediate state, is that still a full human nature when it doesn't have the human body and it only has the human soul? If you say no, then he's only partly human. What is he? If he's not, and is he a human person without the human body? Same thing with Christ. You want to affirm that Christ everlastingly will be truly God and truly man if the human body is necessary in order to be fully human and have a full human nature, and he doesn't have that body in heaven, well, then he's not fully human. He's no longer fully human. He left the body, now he's not fully human. That's a huge problem for you.
Takes into union with himself a full human nature, body and soul. When the body dies, the soul doesn't cease to exist. And so when Christ died physically, his soul didn't cease to exist. Neither did it separate the union that had already been established at the incarnation between Christ as a divine person and that human soul. They're still fundamentally united. The soul doesn't become a part of the Godhead, right? It still remains a human soul. Okay. It never becomes a part of the divine nature.
So you have it on video, and so do we. Yeah. But I'm going to repeat this again. Okay, so there was no soul before Jesus was in the womb of Mary, right? Okay. So Jesus came in the womb. God created a new soul.
Yeah.
For Jesus.
Yeah, we don't
became a part of it.
Jesus. We have a different conception of what the soul is.
So okay, let's just keep going. Soul, body, connect. Okay. He came out on earth. You're with me, Anthony?
Yes.
Okay. He goes to the cross. He gets killed, according to you. Now his soul and body separate. His soul that was not a part of the God union before, was not a part of Jesus before, where does that soul go?
It remains his soul.
And where does he go?
He goes back to the Father.
So the Father now has an increased soul. You said it, and you said it again, and now you're denying it. All right, Anthony. Thank you.
Wait a minute. When you say you believe that Allah raised Jesus to himself, you believe that eventually someday you guys are all going to go, well, somebody's going to Jannah, right? Somebody's going to heaven.
Every Muslim, Allah makes us.
Say they're added to Allah, like there's some part of his nature?
We do not believe, let me respond. We do not believe we in Jannah are a part of Allah.
And neither do I.
But you said, no, but you said Jesus is a part of God.
No.
We're talking about Jesus' soul.
I said,
you got God, bro. It's over. It's over. Thank you.
You've been asserting
it's over, man. Look, it's over. It's over. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, you can get
Thank you.
We'll bring Sam in here in just a second.
We do not believe we in Jannah are a part of Allah.
And neither do I.
But you said, no, but you said Jesus is a part of God.
No.
We're talking about Jesus' soul.
I said,
you got God, bro. It's over. It's over. Thank you.
You've been asserting
it's over, man. Look, it's over. It's over. Thank you. Thank you. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, you can get
Thank you.
We'll bring Sam in here in just a second. But we need to be clear here. I never said that Christ's soul becomes part of the deity. That was your claim. That was your claim.
I'm glad this is recorded.
I'm so glad because I'm going to show you.
Okay, so where does that soul go?
Where does the soul go? What does it have to do with where does the soul go?
Jesus' soul. Where does it go?
Do you think if somebody's soul goes to heaven, it becomes part of God?
No.
Well, neither do I.
But you said Jesus' soul connected with him. It doesn't separate and goes back to being a part of God.
But listen,
come on, you guys got to see this. Come on.
Being part of God. You said that. And you had your laugh track, and then you turned your hand to the camera.
Where did the soul? Where did Jesus' soul go?
Okay, now let's be clear. Your assumption is if his soul goes up to heaven, then somehow it becomes
where
part
does
of the deity.
Jesus' soul go?
Jesus' soul remains forever united to his divine nature.
Okay, where does his divine nature? Is he back being a part of God?
What do you mean back to being part of God? He never ceased being part of God.
But he was human here, right?
And as to his divine nature, he's always God. He never ceases to be God.
So then when he got a soul attached to him,
a human nature, which includes a human soul,
right?
At his death, he doesn't cease.
Okay, so that soul is now part of the divine nature of Jesus. A part of Jesus' soul go.
Jesus' soul remains forever united to his divine nature.
Okay, where does his divine nature? Is he back being a part of God?
What do you mean back to being part of God? He never ceased being part of God.
But he was human here, right?
And as to his divine nature, he's always God. He never ceases to be God.
So then when he got a soul attached to him,
a human nature, which includes a human soul,
right?
At his death, he doesn't cease.
Okay, so that's
So again, now he flops back to saying human nature with the human soul. So which is it, Anthony? You have a doctrine that says you have Christ in the incarnation. He quotes Chalcedon, one person with two natures. He's one person, which is the divine person prior to the incarnation. And he had the divine nature, of course, supposedly anyway. He takes on human flesh, adds a human nature to himself, keeps that, which is supposedly a soul and a body. Then at the ascension to heaven, he discards the body, gets rid of the human body. And the question is, with merely the human soul, is that still a full human nature? And is it a human person? That's a question that you need to answer. Because you keep flip-flopping back and forth. Is it the human nature or not? If not, then Christ is not fully human right now. He's partly human because he doesn't have a human body. So he's not fully man. Or on the other hand, if you say that he is fully man, apart from the human body, then that means that the human soul is sufficient in order to be fully human. So, which you contradicted before. You said you needed a soul and body. So you're jammed either way you slice it, bro.
Soul is now part of the divine nature of Jesus. Is part of. Allah.
That soul remains united in his person.
Yes.
It's his soul.
So
but
God,
it's not his divine nature.
So it's a part of him.
That's your discharge.
Is a part of God or not?
It is his. He has a divine nature and a human nature.
Is that soul, because his human body is dead, so his human soul, is it a part of God or not?
It is not a part of his divine nature.
It's not a part of God or not?
It's not divine nature.
So it's a part of him.
That's your discharge.
Is it a part of God or not?
It is his. He has a divine nature and a human nature.
Is that soul, because his human body is dead, so his human soul, is it a part of God or not?
It is not a part of his divine nature.
It's not a part of God or not?
It's not part of his divine nature.
So Jesus' soul is not a part of God?
It's not part of his divine nature.
It's a very simple question.
It's a very simple answer.
Is it a part of God, yes or no?
It's a very simple answer. His soul is his human nature, not his divine nature. Jesus, that person, has two natures. Divine.
Again, what did he say? His soul is his human nature. Which one is it? Is his soul his human nature, or his soul and human body his human nature? Can't be the same. That's a contradiction, my friend. Which one is it? Is the soul sufficient to be a fully human nature, and the body is merely accidental, or is the soul necessary but not sufficient, and that the human body is needed in order to be considered a fully human thing? Human nature, fully human nature. Anthony Rogers has flip-flopped several times on this issue, and it's unclear which one it is. I don't know if he himself has a settled position because he's just going back and forth on it.
I'm human. You keep wanting to conflate the two. So Christian theology has always said that's not true.
So when Jesus died,
after doing Da'if for so long, for the first time, you're just now learning that's not Christian theology.
Anthony,
we got it on film.
Anthony,
you said it.
Anthony,
you
this
said
is the first time, as I said, that the way you're explaining it, right? Because other Christians explain it differently. But let me tell you. Okay, let me tell you this. The question you're not answering: that soul that got created, is that a part of God? Yes or no?
Not in the sense you're asking.
Okay, thank you. So right? the soul of Jesus is not a part of God.
In the
Got
sense
it.
that you're asking,
thank
you're
you.
assuming it's part of his divine nature.
Okay, so you're saying Jesus' soul, his human body's dead, but his soul is not a part of God. Thank you. I got it.
Absolutely.
Okay, even after he died.
That's just classic Christianity.
Even after he died.
Welcome to Christianity 101.
So Jesus' soul is in heaven?
Yes.
So Jesus will be God, and his soul will be in heaven.
Why are you doing this?
Because God, I mean, you hope you will be in heaven, right?
Yeah, and I'm not
you're
going to be God.
But your soul is separate, right?
Your soul's in heaven, then it's part of God.
No, I didn't. I never said that. I never said that. I did not make that assumption. This is a flat mistruth, I'll say, right?
That's not your assumption.
Let me explain it to you again. Okay, let me explain my assumptions, okay? Let me explain you said Jesus did not have a soul before the womb of Mary. Let me speak now, right? Jesus comes to the womb of Mary. God creates a body for Jesus and a soul for Jesus. Now Jesus is a body, a soul, and a divine nature, according to you. Then he lives in life, and he lives with those three components. Now at the cross, according to you, his body dies, right? And his soul and his divine nature go back to being a part of God. So now...
What's the conjunction? Soul and divine nature.
That's what I said. Yeah, go back to being a part of God.
No, I didn't say that. That's where you keep making the false turn.
So where does the soul go?
You're confusing location with ontology.
Okay.
You seem to think that Christ's location means some fundamental change in his ontology.
Christ on
That's
earth,
a complete category.
Christ on earth was God walking around, right?
This whole time in this argument, you've been saying that you object to the incarnation because it's irrational, and now you're being as irrational as possible.
I'm not.
You keep making a false turn that rests on the false assumption that if Jesus goes to the Father, then something about his ontology changes. That's just utterly fallacious.
Okay, let me. When Jesus was walking around on earth, when Jesus was walking around, was he God himself?
He was both God and man.
Okay, so as God, he was walking on earth.
Absolutely.
In a human form.
With a human body, absolutely.
And a human soul.
And a human soul.
And that changed.
What changed?
When he died on the cross.
His body died, went to the dust. His soul remained his soul, but never his divine nature. It's still not his part of his divine nature.
So his soul then
never becomes part of his divine nature.
So his soul will never be part of God.
It'll never be part of his divine nature. Christ is one person.
I got you. Thank you.
He's a divine person. He has two natures.
I understand your answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
So note again what he said. Again, using classical Chalcedonian Christology, Rogers says, look, Christ is one person, a divine person. He says that Christ is a divine person, a single person with two complete natures. Now, I've argued that Chalcedonian Christology is, by definition, is Nestorian, and there's no really way to get around Nestorianism other than to just embrace contradictions like J.C. Beale. But yeah, I'm gonna read another quote from Craig in a little bit to kind of solidify and really drive home this issue of personhood and nature, see what's really going on with the incarnation here. But let's see if we can power through some of this and try to finish it up, inshallah.
Don't agree with it?
Okay, well,
But that's my okay.
But I'm
Sure.
saying you understand what it is now.
David, do you have the same?
Do you understand?
Do you agree that the soul of Christ is not a part of God?
It's not a part of his divine nature.
You believe that? David would.
That's basic Christianity.
I mean, many Christians here, preachers and pastors, have said the soul of Christ is a part of God, right?
Well,
but you're saying it's not. Okay, understand.
see, I don't know
You're
how
saying
they-
the soul of Christ was created, and when Christ died, his soul does not become God.
Absolutely not.
Okay, his soul is in heaven.
So let me just say this then. I can't speak for other Christians, right? In this sense, the people you talk to, right? I'm not going to say you're misrepresenting them. There are
You can talk to
possibilities, right? No. I'm saying they might be speaking less than precisely,
Okay.
or you might be misunderstanding them.
Okay.
I can tell you this, even with all the laugh tracks going on, I can tell you this: historic, classic Christianity, in terms of its official formal creeds and confessions, teaches exactly what I just told you.
Okay.
Right? The Chalcedonian Creed, which is historic Christianity in its affirmation of the natures of Christ, has always affirmed that Christ had a fully human nature,
Okay.
and those two natures forever are distinct. His human nature could never be his divine
Interesting.
nature. Never.
So the soul of Christ is not a part of God.
It's not a part of his divine essence, his
Okay.
nature, right? And this goes back to a fundamental distinction of Christianity that I think we agree on. And you would hold it as a Muslim, not as, I'm not saying you hold this. The creator-creature distinction. There's an absolute distinction
Yes.
between the two.
Yes.
And so as Christians, we affirm that distinction, and we don't believe the incarnation ever blurs that distinction.
But we believe Jesus was a creation. Walaikum salam.
Well, you believe he only was a human being.
He was a creation.
Yeah. And
But you believe he was a creation and the creator.
we believe that he was the
That's not-
creator who took upon himself a human nature.
So there you go. That's what the contradiction is. The contradiction isn't that he's one or the other. It's that he's both simultaneously. How is it, like Craig said, that a single person can have two sets of contradictory attributes? That's what the contradiction is. And Rogers hasn't really resolved that, as far as I can tell, really at all.